Hey everybody, this is Bob Goodwin, President of Career Club, and welcome to today's webinar on how to create a better candidate experience. I'm joined by my friend and co-host, Kevin Grossman, who's the VP of Research at ERE Media. Kevin, welcome. How are you?
Bob, thanks for having me. I'm
No,
good. Good.
this is
Yeah,
great.
glad to be here.
Awesome. Where are you calling in from today, Kevin?
Santa Cruz, California, Kevin's worldwide headquarters.
I'm calling from our European headquarters today,
Sure.
Kevin. I'm in Norway today, seeing our daughter. Yeah. So don't feel sorry for me because Norway's pretty nice in May.
I know. I've never been. I've been to Sweden, but not Norway. So,
well, if you can't go to Norway, go to Sweden.
I know, right?
How they would think about it. Yeah. But I'm really excited about today's topic, and I want to thank everybody who is online today. Hey, Heather, thanks so much for dialing in from Cincinnati. So I'm really excited about today's topic. Kevin, you and I have gotten to know each other over the past few months, and I am just completely enamored with the research that you guys do on candidate experience. You know, we're going to have a lot of talent acquisition and HR professionals on the line today. And we want to encourage you guys very quickly to make sure that you comment, ask your questions. I know Kevin will be asking you some questions, but the reality is that, talent is really kind of the heartbeat of a company, and it's what makes everything work. And as companies are working on, just having the best talent available to them, sometimes the candidate experience is really kind of what makes or breaks a candidate deciding to go with one company or another. And then obviously there's the employer brand aspects of this too. And so what I love about what you guys have, Kevin, is it's real data. It's not opinions, right? It's not, well, I kind of feel we're doing pretty good. It's like, no, these are real facts. And what's even better about it, it's sourced from candidates who are actually going through companies' experience, and that it's trendable. And as a market research geek for the past 20 years, having trendable, not just point in time data, but trendable data to really see, is it getting better? It provides context. And then the other piece that I love about what you guys have are the diagnostics, kind of what's behind the top line numbers that we're seeing. And so, again, I love our topic. Ask people if you can hold on. Kevin should be done somewhere around 45 after the hour.
Yeah.
And we're going to also be presenting a solution to folks. So yes, there's going to be a lot of insight and data that Kevin's going to be sharing with you, but we're also going to be sharing a solution for you all that can help drive a superior candidate experience and drive the employer brand. So all of that said, Kevin, I am happy to turn the steering wheel over to you. And again, I love what you guys do and can't wait to see what you got for us.
Bob, thank you so much. And Bob, feel free also to comment as I go through. If you've got thoughts and insights, feel free to share.
Yep.
And everybody that's on the stream, feel free to do the same. And because there will be some questions that I'll ask you all too, and love to hear back from you as I go through this presentation. Sound good?
Awesome. Off you go.
All right. So thanks everybody. Again, just to give a little background for everybody who maybe not be familiar with the CandE Benchmark Research Program. We were previously known as Talent Board, and we merged with ERE Media at the end of last year. We've been doing this research for a long time, going into 13 years now. We've worked with a lot of employers over the years. We've surveyed a lot of candidates, and I'm already in the middle of this year's program, which I'll give a plug to at the end too. And we've given a lot of awards away too. And our awards are solely based on the ratings data to companies that have above average ratings every year in North America, EMEA, APAC, and Latin America. And this gives you the scope of research from last year. Just to give you some numbers, the biggest part of our research is North America, but we do have great data sets in all the other regions. And right now, again, we're collecting for the 2024 year. So just some brief commentary. Some of you that are on may have experienced a little bit of a bumpy road the past year and a half, 2 years. This is, definitely it's been a rough TA market as a profession. I think overall, there's been, lack of change, of rapid change and up and down fluctuations, especially since COVID. I mean, in fact, I've been joking now, Bob, when we talk about pre-COVID, It feels like it's the Cretaceous period, right? Like 100,000 years ago right now. So it's been, it has been rough for a lot of folks. And there's always some business impacts that impacts your business, that impacts recruiting and hiring at the end of the day. So we had a pandemic. Who plans for that, right? You may have leadership changes in your team, be part of merger and acquisition activity. All of these kinds of things impact the business, which impacts recruiting and hiring at the end of the day. And the thing that we have found over the years in our research, unfortunately, is that one of the hardest things for organizations to do is to not to identify weaknesses and make improvements in the recruiting process, but to sustain them over time because of those business impacts that are happening all the time with us. And that's a hard one to row. I'm just really curious in the chat. We'll just be really quick about this for those that are on. What is the one word that would describe your employer brand? Post it in the chat for me right now. How would you describe your employer brand in one word? Everybody's fixated. Oh, there's a delay too. I know, right? I think there's a delay. Yes. So real quick, post one word that describes your employer brand, and then we'll move on to then I'll make a quick comment. I'll go ahead and make the commentary about this. Usually what happens, Bob, when we do this, I do this in workshops, presentations, most of the words, random, there you go. Most of the words actually for employer brand are more neutral to positive. That's what we find. Random is care is one. There you go. I have to be careful about the delay here. I think that's part of the issue too. Empathetic, most of those, again, neutral to positive. What happens though is that we go the other way around. And then I ask you the same exercise for those that give me one word that describes your candidate experience. Usually what we're seeing, and feel free to post them in the chat, is more neutral to negative words. Usually, not always, but that's usually the case. And everybody on this call should know. Good. I like to see transparent. That's great. Those should align, right? Your employer brand is how you're promoting the organization and your jobs and what might be like to work there. And you want that candidate experience to align. That's the whole point of me.
Hey, Kevin.
Yeah.
Kevin. Yeah. So I'm going to chime in a little bit.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So, I do a podcast, and we've been very fortunate to have some pretty important, but I think high profile people. And one of them was the chief marketing officer for MasterCard, who is one of the highest rated CMOs in the world, Raj Menon. And I asked him this exact question, which is, to what extent, does the employer brand, the brand that you have outside, align with the brand that you have inside the company? Yeah. And he's like, oh my gosh, that is hugely important. I work closely with our chief people officer to get that alignment happening, because if we aren't feeling it inside these four walls, then it's guaranteed it's actually not going to work with consumers.
Right. That's true. And it will, even if you're not a consumer-based business, it's going to impact your referrals for all companies at the end of the day, which I will touch on later on in this presentation. So real quick, you don't have to actually post on this if you don't want, but I always like to ask folks, how would you rate your own self-assess your own recruiting and candidate experience? And it's we do this every year in our benchmark. We do this on a monthly basis for our monthly pulse surveys that we do that maybe some of you have read. Is it lagging, improving, competing, and leading? And what we find in our data is that most of the companies, and this is comparing the last 2 years of benchmark and then the past 4 months of the overall, and actually I forgot to squeak April in here, but the takeaway from this is that most of the companies that are responding, the TA leaders that are responding in their teams, are either competing or improving. And that's what we want to see at the end of the day. Leading did jump way up recently in our benchmark data and research, and then lagging continues to be low, which is what we want to see at the end of the day. So that's kind of a self-assessment, not based on the candidate responses, but it's definitely based on what employers feel. These are the ratings that we ask with lots of data that we capture every year, but these are the key ratings that we ask for every year. Overall rating. How would you rate your experience overall, candidate? How likely are you to apply again, to refer others? And then how likely are you to change your relationship status with us? the employer based on your experience. And that answer is all 4 of those ratings are plugged into a calculation that we run, which we call the CandE score. And that's how we then stack rank and determine who's above average and who we then shout from the rooftops for. Our program is anonymous and confidential for employers and their candidates. We only share the company name if you win one of our awards. But these key ratings, some of which I'm going to talk about now, here, unfortunately, is a trend we don't want to see, but we are seeing it. And what I'm looking at now, basically, I'm not sure why some of the numbers didn't remain percentage points, but that's okay. Basically, that last question that I just mentioned, what kind of a relationship are you going to have with us at the end of the day? This is the great experience. So this is the percentage of candidates that I had a great experience. I will keep doing things with you, whatever that means to the candidate. We also call this the contentment rate now, but that is definitely on the decline globally from last year to this year. And this is early returns for this year's data. That's not a trend we want to see, and we'll talk more about why and how you can make a difference at the end of the day. But that's what we're seeing. The other side of that same question is, I had a really bad experience. I will not do anything with you again. I won't apply. I won't refer. I won't buy stuff. If you're a consumer-based business, I won't be a brand advocate. All of those things. That is on the rise globally in our data. And basically in North America, even though it actually has ticked down a bit since the last time that I just updated this, that's because the data is dynamic right now because we're collecting it. We collect it through the end of August. But it's still 16-17% resentment in North America. That's the blue line. That's the highest we've ever seen it. Actually, anywhere in our data is the highest since the beginning of what we call CandE time. So not a good trend, Bob.
Not a good trend
at all to see that. But these, and as I go through the rest of my presentation, these are key differentiators that you control, I would argue, in your organizations today on how you deliver recruiting and candidate experience, and what that experience is. So consistent and timely communications from pre-application all the way to onboarding, timely expectation setting, engagement and follow through, asking your candidates for feedback and then acting on that, and also giving feedback to finalists, especially, which is one of the things that we recommend every year. And I'll talk more about that, especially to finalists, and then just being more transparent and accountable. I know that the transparency came up in the stream earlier when I was asking those questions. That's always important. All of these things can have a result in a higher level of perceived candidate fairness, which we know is subjective. But when candidates feel it was positive and fair, then they're more likely to engage your business and your brand. And considering that most won't get the job. In fact, in our data, Bob, 90% of the candidates aren't hired. And that's real life at the end of the day for most jobs.
So with that, just super quick, with that as a background, like positivity seems like a tough hurdle.
It is. And here's the reality of that. There are 2 natural skews in our data every year. There is the positive skew for those people who get the job. And even if they felt like maybe there were some bumps along the road, but they wanted the job and they got hired, they're more likely to rate you higher. That's the positive skew. The negative skew is for everybody else. But the reality is we do find that there is a percentage of candidates across the candidate journey that will say they felt like it was their bum. They didn't go any farther, or they didn't get the job, but they felt like it was positive and fair and they would be willing to try again. That's the key. But there are those skews though in the data. This is a best practice chart. I'm always happy to share this with anybody. And Bob, I'm happy to share the slides with anybody that's on today too. But this is a best practice chart. I'm not going to read this verbatim, that we see with companies that have above average ratings every year across the candidate journey, a lot of which I'm going to be talking about in the rest of this presentation. And then technology considerations, which I will touch on a little bit too, because recruiting tech stacks are such a big part of what all of you do. You couldn't scale otherwise, and it's been that way for a long time. But there's definitely things to think about and how that impacts not only the candidate experience, which we're talking about, but also the recruiter and hiring manager experience too. Here's the thing. A lot of companies, big and small across industries, spend a lot of money on job advertising. You might spend a lot of money on employer branding and developing new EVPs. And of course, your recruiting tech stack, right? At the end of the day, it goes across the journey from pre-application all the way to offer and onboarding, but your candidates could care less. They really do. They really do. There's only one thing, Bob, and you and I both know this, that candidates care about, and it's this: getting the job.
Yep.
That's it. That is all they care about at the end of the day. And the reality is that most won't for any given job. So what can you do? I always like to say that we are in the business of no in recruiting and hiring. We say no a lot more than we say yes. And yes, I want to flip that on its head, because this is I would argue, a treasured profession, because we are giving people jobs, finding who would be a good fit for us and giving them jobs. So nobody, you don't have to answer in the stream, but what do you think is top of mind? Well, I'm going to tell you, besides benefit and salary, which is always important for candidates, what else are they consuming before they apply? What are things they want to read about you, your company, your job, etc.? And this includes value. Values is number one. The past 2 years in our data, values has been the number one marketing content for candidates. That it was never the case before. Values was important before, but it's never been number one. And it has been the past 2 years. And I would argue, of all the existential crises that many of us have been through since 2020, I think that is super top of mind and important for people.
And Kevin, what we see in other data is that with Gen Z, this is only becoming even more important. And I believe Gen Z will be the number one demographic in the workforce in 2030. As boomers retire and Gen Z really kind of comes into full blossom in the workforce, this is extremely important to them. And you can't fake values.
No, you can't. And that's closely tied to culture. Those go hand in hand. Also, will I feel like I belong and included at your organization? Are there career path opportunities? Is there this is not true for of course, all positions, but is there any flexibility, whether it's virtual or not? Is there any flexibility for me as an employee? That's been a big thing that ties into values for individuals at the end of the day. And there's been a lot of backlash with this return to work mandate that's been going on in organizations. Whatever the case is, flexibility is important. Why are the people there now? Why are they there at your organization? Why are they staying there? I want to know all of these things. And what we find is that the more of this content that is put out there in the ether and marketed to your candidates, the higher research rating you're going to get. We also do journey ratings besides the key ratings I talked about. Excuse me.
Poor kid.
I know, it's just that head cold that I finally got. 34% higher research rating. So it's definitely a big difference when candidates are saying this kind of information. And let me just jump ahead. I always like to ask this question, and again, you don't have to worry about answering in the chat, but there's a lot of candidates that apply and then have not heard back for 1 to 2+ months in our data, especially. And last year, this is based on last year's data because we're still collecting for this year. That's 37% of the candidates overall, all candidates in hourly professional, said that they had not heard back after 1 or 2 months. And that's up from the year before. And it's much higher for professional hires than it is for hourly, which I always find fascinating. But, there are more hoops to jump through as a professional hire than hourly usually. So that's a big part of the difference. But that's a big chunk of time and individuals who claim they're not hearing back. That doesn't mean that they're, did they get your automated messages? Yes, more than likely. But everybody wants to talk to a human, and the reality is that most won't unless they're going to get screened and interviewed. So here's the thing. For most candidates, they're going to research and apply, and that's the end of the road. They're not qualified enough for you to screen them further. They'll get an acknowledgement, they'll get a rejection, and that's the experience. It's very limited. It's the application stage is the least glamorous part of recruiting and hiring anyway, for all parties, I would argue, but especially for candidates. it's only that smaller group that's going to get screen interviewed, made offers to, and hired that's going to have more interaction with you and your team and the hiring manager, where I would argue that level of investment is greater for both parties, and it's important that that experience is sound, even more so than the point of application at the end of the day, but it's still important. I always ask everybody, have you ever applied for your own jobs? Not for the job you got, but for as a test. What are we putting candidates through?
Yeah.
The good news is that, Bob, the trend is that it's definitely been collapsed. The actual application can be, less than 10, less than 5 minutes. And that's a good thing. Now, you're also letting a lot more people in the door. What are you doing after they applied? That depends on what your process is and you set up. But testing your application process is really important. These are things that we find. Do candidates know how long it's going to take? Do they know how far they're in the process when they're taking it? Can they ask questions? Is there a conversational AI chatbot available, or a human? But most likely it's not going to be humans. Is there a way that I can get questions? FAQs are great, but they're also, I would argue, a pain in the tuchus, as the expression goes, just because they're always really hard to navigate and to figure out. So again, not a plug for any particular vendor, but I'm telling you that the conversational AI that's available today can be very beneficial even before they apply. But and are you notifying them with text? Hey, start the application now. Here's a status update. All of those things it's a much higher level of deliverability with text now than with email. And there are some positions and roles, especially in the high volume hiring side that you may be hiring for, where individuals just don't even check those emails very much. And we get spam filters. So texting is a great way to reach. And then do they know the next steps after they've applied, especially even if that's the end of the road? And that's important. And that can result in a much higher application rating at that stage that we see in our data at the point of application.
Well, we're going to pick up on that thread here in just a little bit as well. Kevin, I appreciate you bringing up the text piece here. Again, oftentimes we are not our candidate,
right?
And how I prefer to receive any kind of a notification or communication may not look like how my candidate prefers to receive it.
Yeah.
And, being dialed into, what's their preferred communication channel, or having multiple channels, right? Because, as you say, well, I got ghosted. Well, maybe you did, maybe you didn't. Maybe it went to a spam folder that you never check. But we all know everybody's on these guys all the time, and they're going to see their text messages.
Right. Yeah, that's true. It's absolutely true. And then, what about, and this is, of course, always going to vary depending on job type, but how long is it taking for those that are qualified to get an interview scheduled after they've applied? And when we ask them, is it happening within 1 month? It's only last year it was only 19% of candidates. Now, yes, I know it varies if you're talking about an hourly position, which is faster, versus a professional position, which can take longer, but it's definitely a percentage of folks that time's always a factor. That's the whole point here in getting an interview scheduled. Even if it's a screen first, then an interview if they're qualified, but time is the factor. And for those hard to fill roles, the longer that time continues, the less likely you are to be able to potentially close that person at the end of the day. Here's the other thing that we always recommend. Are you prepping your candidates before, during, and after the screening and interview stage? Meaning, do they understand what's going to happen? Do they have an agenda? Do they know who they're going to be meeting with, whether it's virtual or not? Do they get any instructions at all? Period. Is there, and another thing that's really important that we find, pay transparency is here to stay. And at least 9 or 10 states, I believe, now have those laws on the books. I think it's only going to continue to grow. And only 22% of the candidates at this stage tell us that they are told the salary or salary range without asking. But I think that number is going to go up as transparency goes up. But it's a benefit, though. It's always a positive sentiment bump when that's the case. And by the way, that may mean that's the end of the road, because the candidate might go, but that's a way to self-select too, right? I mean, that's a big, comp is always a big deal in recruiting and hiring, but that's an important thing. But when these things are done, when that prep is happening before, the engagement during, and then follow up after, it's a much higher, not only interview rating that we see in our data, but a fairness. Do they feel fairness is super subjective?
Yes.
But they will feel that it's a more fair process when more of these things are invested in. That's what we see.
Just super quick, Kevin, just to go back to the previous slide, just to be empathetic to the recruiters on the call, or somebody who might be watching this later, is you guys have been downsized a lot. And so you've got fewer people doing the same amount of work. And so just things take longer, right? I mean, you have fewer hands and feet trying to tackle a workload. And of course, then there's, hiring managers and responsiveness internally and all the things that lead to that. So I just want to, and I know you well enough, Kevin, to know this is not at all what you're saying. It's not for a lack of desire to do better with these kinds of things.
Right.
It's just there are a lot of limiting factors that are acting on this experience, but being able to identify what those are, bless you, and solve for them, is really kind of key here.
No, it is. It is very much so. And that's what we're talking about. And by the way, even the highest rated companies in our research every year, and you can see those companies because they're listed on our site, at ERE Media, where we show the CandE winners every year. They're not still doing it at 100% of the time. No company is, right? But they're doing it most of the time consistently. Again, I go back to my whole point about sustaining is hard. It is hard, but companies that can do it year after year, I would argue, are the ones that are going to be more competitive on the talent side at the end of the day. Does it mean that if I'm candidate Kevin and this not so great, unresponsive, toxic company, I still want to work there? Because there are people that want to work at companies with certain brands, right? I don't even have to name them. That's their choice at the end of the day. But you're going to open up those gates more if you're doing these things to make it a better experience overall for candidates. Here's something that's interesting, because I get this question a lot during workshops, presentations. What are better video interviewing one way, recorded, by the way? That's actually the question. What kind of experience is that for candidates? Well, the reality is it's the one that's rated the lowest from a fairness perspective. This is NPS scale now. Plus 100, minus 100 scales. They're still positive scales because candidates are getting engagement at this stage. They're being interviewed. But the one way recorded, there's not an opportunity to engage the employer, the recruiter, the hiring manager. And I understand there's a value in that screening, and I'm not taking that away. But you can see based on these scores, it's the lowest score. Especially compared, 28, it's deemed, according to the candidate, 28% less fair than if it was an in-person interview, which should make sense. The virtual live is the next highest score, and it's even higher this year in our 2024 data that we're capturing. And then phone screens are kind of in the middle. But this is how candidates view it. Again, video screening one way, recorded can be valuable screening tools for you. They're not to candidates, but I think everybody understands that on this call.
And qualitatively, Kevin, obviously at Career Club, we're working with job-seeking candidates all day, every day. And these one-way video things are very uncomfortable for people. They're awkward. And even as we're doing this, and I'm looking at my friendly little Elgato camera right now, I don't like doing this. Looking at you, I can talk to you, and that's easy for me. Yeah. But looking at this camera, particularly when there's the pressure of trying to land a job, it's just that is not a recipe for success for a lot of people. The medium is awkward, and just the context is awkward. And you put that together, and you may not see people at their very finest.
You are right about that, and I can tell you that is correct. That's usually the most of the sentiment. But again, it can be a valuable screening tool for employers. So it's kind of a give and a take there,
Right.
but that's exactly how candidates perceive it. It's interesting that we're using AI a lot more, and I wanted to touch on it a little bit. I think most of the AI that companies are implementing in their recruiting tech is related to candidate communications and high level matching, not selection decisions, but more of those. But I ask ChatGPT, I use it a lot regularly to get questions answered, get things started. I asked it to show me a picture of happy professional candidates and happy hourly candidates. And so this is just, I'm kind of establishing that there's definitely still a bias in even AI, because we're humans that are biased developing it. But you look at the happy professional candidates, both groups, by the way, are diverse, but the professional are all dressed up because that's how we see it. The hourly are dressed down, and it's spelled hourly candidates incorrectly. That was what I thought was very odd. That AI to me right now is like a genius toddler. That is going to change, by the way, in the next 5 to 10 years. I think we're in for some dramatic changes, but that's what it is now. That's what I think. And when we ask the job candidates, which we're starting to ask this year, are you using AI to help you in your job search, to write your resume, write a cover letter, etc.? And only 9% of the candidates this year that are responding, this is the first time we asked them this, 9% say they're doing it. 12% say, I don't know what that is, believe it or not. But
yeah. So
early days.
So when we're working with job candidates, and I ask them how you're using ChatGPT, and then I start showing them some of the things they could be doing. Like, here's my resume, here's the job description, tell me where I fit really well with this role. Yeah. Tell me the things that I should expect in an interview, like for this kind of role, given my background.
Yeah.
And like more than just the, will you write me a cover letter? Will you, tell me whatever? It's Shazam. Yeah. For most people, like, holy cow, you can do that? That was like magic. Or taking their Strength Finders thing and their resume and saying, please write me 5 different tell me about yourself statements, or a professional summary. Yeah. Like there is a lot of robustness that's available if you just start to play with it a little bit. Yeah. And get creative with it. Yep. But apparently it's not super good at spelling and
no, not yet. No, and I think that's going to change dramatically in the near future. But I think another thing there are other tools. Just as a quick aside, I don't know if you've heard of, Bob, the site called lazyapply.com.
Oh yeah.
It's a little bit. This is the not so great side, right? This is the site that allows candidates to apply for thousands of jobs at once. Now, why you would want to do that, unless you're just like, that's the serial spam applier, I don't know, but that's a reality that's out there today, and companies are seeing spikes in volume. There's unfortunately a lot of fake candidates too. That's another thing that we're finding. But for most of us, at the end of the day, it's still early days for AI.
Yeah, there's a good article in Business Insider a couple of weeks ago. Aki Ito is the writer, and it's on this exact topic. And she kind of checked out some of these different, basically lazy apply kinds of, bot applying things. And, if you're a candidate on this call, be careful, because it will start to morph your background and say things about you that aren't true.
Right.
And I'll say that's your brand now out there in front of potential employers. So everybody gets the efficiency part of it, but the quality can get mutated pretty quickly, and it's still got your name on it.
And you could possibly get yourself tagged in ATS, in companies' ATSs, and nobody's going to verify this part, but there are those codes where you're just not going to really come up anymore. Yep. If you're constantly serial applying. So that's just one thing to keep in mind. This is just a quick breakdown. I mean, obviously there are differences between whether you're hiring for hourly, especially high volume, versus professional hires, right? Most hourly candidates only have 1 to 2 job interviews. That climbs to much higher for professional. Usually they can have 2, 3, 4 plus. A question that comes up, just to answer this really quick, does deteriorate candidate experience? And the answer to that is about time. Not necessarily. If I have a slate of interviews one day or over 2 days, whether it's virtual, in person, that's not so much the deterioration. It's like if they were spread out or they kept getting rescheduled or it's time is the factor. What's interesting though in our data, and again, I'm not reading this verbatim, but most of the professional candidates, they had 90% more virtual interviews than hourly, because hourly usually is going to be more on site now. It has been, but even pre-COVID, like in the store, in the manufacturing plant, and the list goes on. Professional hires, it's, the remote number is lower today because more people are being called back, but they still are getting a lot more virtual interviews. It's a money saver too for companies. They don't have to bring people in all the time unless it's a management position at the end of the day. So there's just some quick side notes about, and one thing I did not have a slide for, but I want to make sure to mention really quick is feedback. Every year we ask candidates, are you getting feedback, general or specific? And what we find in the data is that finalists, especially at the interview stage, is what I'm talking about. If they get feedback like this, some job fit, qualification, status feedback as to why they're not being hired, their willingness to refer can increase 30 to 40+%. It's a big jump if they're getting feedback. And usually these are, and the highest rated companies in our research are consistently giving feedback. 100% of the time, no. But a lot of the time, for a lot of different kinds of finalists, yes, they are. And that can be a big benefit at the end of the day.
Kevin, do you see that as a contributor to fairness?
It is. It's fairness. Question comes up, well, what about feedback about culture fit? And I always go, no, you don't do that. I don't even play an employment lawyer on TV, and I would not recommend that. We're talking about job fit, qualification. Right. Listen, there was a lot of strong candidates. We're going another direction. We're going with another candidate that was a little bit stronger than you, because based on you didn't have X, Y, or Z. Or you can reframe it. We recommend you go get more of X, Y, and Z. Right. And then maybe try again at another time. That goes a long way with candidates at the end of the day. I always ask, this is what's interesting. Sometimes in our data, there's fluctuation and sometimes there's not. And it's a different mix of companies and candidates every year. We ask candidates, new hire candidates, did you talk to your hire manager before day one? And usually on average, every year, it's only about 40-ish% that say that they do. And that's an area I know employers are working on, trying to encourage their hiring managers more and more to contact the people before day one for nurturing and engagement. That goes a long way with candidates, and it can result in a higher onboarding rating when not only timely offers, but are they being nurtured, not just getting the paperwork done, are they being talked to, engaged, nurtured before day one? Do they get the call from the hiring manager or a text from the hiring manager or something? Those all can go a long way, and that helps with retention out of the gate, right? Because we have struggled. I mean, fewer employees are leaving now their jobs than they did a year and a half ago or 2 years ago because the market shifted again. But there are individuals, but for you to get retention out of the gate, it's helpful to engage. And that's why we have pre-boarding, and we have pre-boarding teams now for larger, complex organizations, excuse me, that are investing this time at the end of the day. So here's the thing. You all control the dials for everything. I would argue for everything you do, your people that are in recruiting and hiring, your processes, your recruiting tech stack, the thing that you have less control over, but you can have a better partnership with are your hiring managers. So that's part of a little bit of a caveat to what I'm saying, but you still would, you control most of the dials. And I would argue that especially for those candidates that are either deemed initially not qualified or those later on, always try to disposition within 1 to 2 weeks. When you know a decision, like, no, we're not going to screen them further, or we're not going to go forward with them, let them know and focus on the people you are going to continue to screen and maybe potentially make offers to. It goes a long way. I'll give you a quick example, Bob, of an extreme. So last year, one of the workshops I did, one of the recruiters came up to me during a break and showed me her phone. And she said, look at this. So I said, okay. And I read it, and it was a pretty standard templatized rejection note. She's like, I got this week from a job I had applied to a year and a half ago.
Oh my gosh.
Now, sometimes I know companies, it's somebody you're clearing your cash out. You want to make sure that you get everybody. I would argue, get on the 1 to 2 week bandwagon and don't even bother doing that, because that's actually more of an affront, I would argue, than not replying at all. If it's a year and a half later. Now, too soon is too soon too. Don't ever have an auto reject go to them 30 seconds after they apply, because that's happened in the past too. You control how soon that can go out, even if there are recruiters activating them. 24, 72 hours, 1 to 2 weeks. Just, and listen, everybody feels like, except for serial appliers, everybody feels they have something for the job and they want, and so, but for most of the candidates that you're looking at, they're just not going to have what you want to screen further. Huh? Just do it and focus on the people you do want to screen. I understand that there's like this gray area sometimes of like, well, there's certain applicants that we're not sure. The hiring manager says, oh, I like those candidates, but let's see who else is on the market.
Yes.
Nobody's ever heard that before, right, Bob? I mean, all the time, but just really try to get into that best practice. It can make all the difference at the end of the day, I would argue, in your experience. So really quick, I'm about wrapping this, kind of winding down now, Bob. Referrals. I mentioned this. Go ahead. What's that?
I said, we're good.
So willingness to refer. Every year, usually a quarter to a third of the candidates still tell us they're extremely likely to refer, which is again, we always look at our data through the definitive anchor scores of absolute yeses and absolute nos. So, and then 90% of our data and candidates don't get hired. So that's still an interesting, I mean, most companies don't think of rejected candidates as possible refers, but they are. And especially if they're internal employees. When we look at our internal data, because a part of our data is internal candidates that are currently working there, it's a higher willingness to, extremely likely to refer. And that's important to note, because you depend on referrals for your hires. Maybe it's 10%, maybe it's 40% of your hires come from referrals, but it's important to know that can impact, a bad candidate experience can impact your refer. And that's true for B2B, B2C, across the board. And again, it'll if it's not a great experience, it's going to cost you potential referrals. Whether
So Kevin, super quick on referrals.
Yeah,
I'm thinking about timing, like time to hire, cost of hire, quality of hire. Do referrals hit on all three of those, or do they tend to help in one area more than another?
Some of the, that's a whole nother discussion about quality of hire, because that's like the holy grail that's been hard to get for companies, and how they measure quality of hire. And there's not really an industry standard on that, but referrals have tended to be, I think, for most companies, the perception is that they are potentially better hires. Sometimes there's some homogeneity there that may or may not be good, but I do think that companies depend on referrals, and they make a lot of hires off of them. What we're not measuring is what's the longevity of that hire. We're not measuring that, but they can hit on all of those. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, for sure. Not going to go into this because of time. I usually do this in workshops, but I like to show everybody, if you wanted to scan this and go to our resentment calculator, this is an opportunity, even if you're a B2B company, to plug some numbers in and see what a potential revenue hit could be based on a poor candidate experience. And even a B2B companies, I say, just pretend you're B2C. It's a great conversation starter, but it's something that you can check out on your own. So as I wrap up here, you're spending a lot of money on your job advertising, your employer branding, your recruiting tech stack. But it can't fix a poor candidate experience alone. You've got to continuously optimize everything that you're doing and get feedback from your candidates, as well as your hiring managers and your own recruiting team to constantly triage. That's just the reality of recruiting and hiring. It's not about happy, right? Because the only happy candidates are those who get the job.
Yep.
So if you have somebody in leadership, I would argue, that says, oh, I want our candidates to be happy. Well, they're not going to be happy unless they get hired. Right. The only thing you control really is, did they feel it was positive and fair, especially when it's still going to skew negative? That's the key. And are they willing to do these things again with you? That's the part that you want to think about when it comes with the majority of candidates that aren't getting the job at the end of the day. And again, those are our differentiators as I showed them to you earlier. All this is free to download in our research, by the way, that you can get here.
Kevin, I'm blown away by how much you guys give away from an insights perspective. It is so rich and robust. Like, please take a picture of this QR code or go to ERE Media's website. It's amazing data.
Yeah, free to download. And we also do a monthly pulse survey. So we're still collecting for May. This is like only 10 questions we ask of TA teams about what's going on in the recruiting world right now. And that's something that we release in an article early every month too, from that past data. And then more about the program, which you can find on our website. And actually Bob is wrapping up. I think I'll actually post for you in a minute. I'll just post the link. But that's the deal. That's what I wanted to share with you all today, Bob.
Well, and Kevin, really quick though, I mean, and maybe that was the last slide you just had. If people want to participate in your research,
it's right here.
It's right there. Okay. So
and you can learn more about the program, and that's where you also can register. But that's pretty detailed. There's a few pages actually, but this is the main page.
Perfect.
That I'll actually I'll post in the LinkedIn chat right now. It's right there. So
it's hard to get better if you don't know where you stand.
Yeah.
Right. And it's kind of relative to yourself over time, but it's also relative to a peer group. And if I didn't learn anything else out of all my years in consumer insights and syndicated data, it's like you need to have comparison points and you need to be able to track it over time. Feeling like we're doing a good job isn't good enough, because candidates are seeing a lot more than you're seeing, and that's that's the standard that you're being held to.
Yep, that's right.
Cool. So that was amazing, Kevin. Thank you. What I wanted to just spend a couple of minutes on, because you talked a lot about your kind of the rejection or disposition phase of this. And as you said, kind of unfortunately, a lot of TA is being in the no business.
Yep.
There's a way to say no, and there's a way to say no. And so what we wanted to share with folks real quick, and I'm going to steal the screen if that's cool with you.
Go ahead. Yeah, do it.
Yep. Let me just kind of wind this back real quick. It's something that we call Journey Forward, and trying to provide a solution. I love how you said it, Kevin. The people have the dials.
Yeah.
It's what do you do with the dials? And so we're going to give you guys a dial here real quick to think about, and happy to engage on. I just want to say real quick, I would encourage people to join me in the podcast that I do with Johnny Taylor from SHRM. He's awesome, and I learn a ton from him, and a lot of that gets applied to what we're talking about today as well. Kevin's a huge influence on me. Johnny's a big influence on me. So you got the headline. It was not an amazing experience. What we're saying in Journey Forward is, in that disposition, in that rejection letter, don't reject, redirect. So, the lawyers have written a very kind of cold, sterile, and safe message. Kevin, thanks so much for applying for the Director of Research role. Unfortunately, we won't be moving forward in the process. We wish you all the best in your future endeavors. And the you and endeavors is optional. And other than that, that's kind of it. Right? And so what we're saying is, wow, there's a really good opportunity to actually change the tone of that message as well as the substance of that message. And so what I mean, this is a kind of reworked disposition letter that actually becomes more empathetic. And it says, while we've decided to move forward with another candidate for the specific role, right? Reapply. There's other roles here. We genuinely believe in supporting talented individuals like you and finding the right opportunity. As a token of our appreciation and commitment to helping job seekers, providing a link to real resources. And I'll show you what that looks like in just a second. And then again, it's encouraging them to stay part of their talent community, to reapply for things, to refer, as Kevin, I think, made a really good point just a moment ago on the importance of referrals. But then again, this does ultimately impact the employer brand. If you're consumer facing, Target sucked. I'm never shopping at Target again. They treated me like crap. Well, you can go use Kevin's calculator and start to figure out, is that costing us real money or not? And you made the point, even if you're B2B, it matters because they're likely to be part of your ecosystem as a customer, as a supplier, as a partner. And you want, obviously, to have the most equity that you can in that regard. So what are we doing? What we're saying is you change the wording, more positive, but also something tangible. So they click on the link. Kevin, you brought up texting, and it got me to thinking, this works in a text message too. You can send a hyperlink in a text message, and it takes you to a co-branded landing page. So the company, us, Career Club, and then some positive language on we want to help you with your journey forward. I'll show you what this is in the next slide, but just that's going to take you to a co-branded landing page. So again, your brand is getting credit for helping them, for being not only just empathetic, but it's not enough to be empathetic, to also be practical and to offer real help to somebody. And so in this kind of first version of this Journey Forward program, what we're offering people is a job search tracking tool. So the candidate clicks on the link. There's been no PII that's passed through, right? So your lawyers aren't going to freak out that you're passing candidate information over to some third party they don't know. The candidate's opting in by doing this. So they're the ones providing their name and their contact information. And what they're being offered is basically a pre-formatted spreadsheet to keep track of their job search. We know that candidates have a lot of stress over forgetting to follow up. Who introduced me to Kevin? Who was the talent acquisition lady at company X, whatever. So the ability to keep track of everything. The second thing, and this is probably what we're finding to be really valuable for people, are free weekly group coaching sessions. I'm going to start one in about an hour. I'm a LinkedIn top job search strategy voice, yay. And so hopefully you know a little bit about what we're talking about when we're actually providing advice. But this is a free every week job search coaching call that we provide to candidates. So think about this. Somebody applied for a role at your company. They weren't a fit for whatever reason for that particular role. We send them this redirection letter that says, hey, not this time, but we really want to encourage you to stay part of our talent community. And then you start providing resources, including a free weekly coaching call. Nobody's doing this. This is a highly differentiated employer brand experience and candidate experience. And then the last thing that we're offering people, and this is really kind of the heartbeat of Career Club, if I'm being transparent, is, my heart's with the candidate because I know the emotional toll that this takes on people psychologically, all kind of like the shame and the guilt and the fear, the anger that people are feeling, and providing them with an article that we wrote. It's basically helping them kind of keep their head together, keep their mind together to be more resilient during this process. So again, I think, hopefully the employer benefits are fairly intuitive at this point. Yep. But really trying to be, more competitive in the market and be an employer of choice for the candidate. Again, this is sort of like, it's what feels like a negative experience at first because I didn't get the role, but demonstrating empathy is easy to claim, hard to demonstrate. You actually have to do something to be empathetic. You can't just, pat somebody on the head. You need to actually help them. That's empathy. And then lastly, this is free. Free to who? Free to the candidate, and for now, free to the employer. So there's no cost. So whatever your budget is, you can afford this. There's no implementation cost. At worst, This is altering the disposition letter or letters in your ATS and changing the language to be more positive and inserting the hyperlink. That's it. There's no integration. There's nothing to do but just install the hyperlink. Kevin, I couldn't tell if you had your hand raised or not.
No, I was just scratching. So.
Okay, no worries. The other thing that we're finding is it's customizable. So if the talent pool that you're drawing from has some unique characteristics like military veterans, recent college graduates, you talked about hourly workers, skilled labor, or other talent-specific needs, the resources can be adapted to any talent pool that you might be drawing from. So know that. And then you kind of inspired this at some level, Kevin, which is because of these co-branded landing pages, we're able to see which people came through from which companies. And because we've got their email address, we can actually go back to them and do some of these NPS types of survey questions to be able to empirically demonstrate to the employer, here's how offering these kinds of resources has increased the likelihood to reapply, the likelihood to refer somebody, the likelihood to do business with your brand, and overall perception of the employer. So I'm trying to think how far. What's in it for me? What's in it for Career Club? Great question. This looks, I teased last week, this looks like every mother of a girl I dated in high school. This is just providing us with known job seekers. So, we know that a lot of people will want the free resources, and we are very happy to offer those. And at some level, as we build trust with people through these calls, these weekly coaching calls, some percentage of those folks will want more help and want to engage more deeply. It's just like going to Costco. The weekly call is the chicken nugget on a toothpick. You taste and you go, that was pretty awesome. I think I might actually want to buy this. And it's the same thing for us. So the beauty of these redirection letters, this journey forward, is it gets us in front of a lot of people that, what we're learning is the HR and talent acquisition professionals wish they could do more for, but don't know how. And so to give them something that they can activate on, right, for free. And then for us, enough of that traffic is going to come through. Some people will want the help, but at a minimum, it allows us to deliver on our mission to just help people through the job search and not just survive it, but learn how to thrive through it. And that's what we're really looking for through this. So that's the essence. I think I might have one or two. So back to QR codes. Welcome to reach out to me directly. It's just bob@career.club, no .com, bob@career.club, or the QR code will take you to the page on our website to get more information. And with that, Kevin, that
Thanks,
was
Bob.
a lot. No, that was a lot of amazing insight that you shared with people. I'm just, again, blown away with what you guys have. And I really, really hope that people that were on the call will take advantage of being part of your research community, right? And then, to the extent that Journey Forward looks like something that would be worth exploring, we'd love to answer any questions or share. Any kind of final thoughts or anything you'd like to maybe wrap us up with, Kevin?
One thing I would recommend is for anybody that's in TA, recruiting and hiring, HR, etc. today, just have a lot of empathy these days. There's a lot of folks that are in our profession that are struggling on the job market right now to find work.
Yes.
And so I have empathy for them and listen to them and open your networks to them. That's what I would recommend.
Yeah. So with that, we are right on time. Kevin, thank you so much. It's, again, always a pleasure. Appreciate everything that you shared. Thank you, everybody that's taken time to join us live, or if you happen to watch us on YouTube at a later date. We hope you enjoyed this, but please feel free to reach out to Kevin or I. And with that, we wish you well. And thank you, Kevin.
Thanks, Bob. All
Cheers.
Right. Bye now.